on this week's episode of In the Suite with Tina Powell.
Well, I think when you get close to it, Tina, you start to understand that financial services is not some esoteric exercise in financial products, right? And securities. That financial service is really about people, right? And it's about helping people at the times in their life where they need it most.
Hi, this is Tina Powell, host of In the Suite, where I sit down with top women leaders and some of the biggest names in the financial services and the wealth management industry. Together, we'll discover some of their best secrets and top strategies to grow a great business, build a strong brand, and lead teams in the 21st century. I hope you'll enjoy hearing their amazing personal stories of triumph, trepidation, and transformation in hopes of becoming better leaders ourselves. The time for you to lead is now, and you're in the suite. My first guest to kick off season 3 is none other than Brian Hamburger. Brian is the founder, president, and CEO of Market Counsel, a leading business and regulatory compliance consultancy to the country's preeminent independent investment advisors. He's also the founder and managing member of the Hamburger law firm, a practice focused on the investment and securities industry. Besides being an entrepreneur, Brian wears many hats. He's a father to 3 children, an attorney, a columnist, and an outspoken industry advocate for independent investment advisors. Investment News named Brian to the class of Icons and Innovators, and Think Advisor listed him to the IA's 25 list of top influential people in 2020. Most recently, Brian was featured on Barron's podcast, The Way Forward, speaking about mergers and acquisitions in the wealth management industry. But there's another subject Brian Hamburger is equally passionate about, and that is about women's empowerment. In today's podcast, Brian reveals the strong, positive female influence in his life from his grandmother, who owned and ran an auto body shop in North Bergen and Fort Lee, New Jersey. He also provides an interesting male perspective about effectively championing diversity, equity, and inclusion here in the suite. As a mentor and a friend, Brian is always challenging me to see things from all different angles and being open to other solutions. Our conversation here is a case in point. In fact, Brian's gifts is his ability to combine a legal mind, business savvy, and an entrepreneurial spirit while being strongly rooted in service and giving back. Brian graduated from Quinnipiac College with a dual major in economics and financial management and achieved a JD from the University of Miami School of Law. He also received a Dean's Service Scholarship and the President's Pinnacle Award for his role as editor-in-chief of Reese Ipsa Lockwood. Brian is a highly qualified individual who could have worked in any industry. However, his genuine desire to provide an unexpected level of value and service attracted him to empowerment, leadership, and compliance in the financial world and in the suite. Wow, Brian Hamburger, take a seat in the suite. This is awesome. Truly, truly an honor to have you today. How are you doing?
Well, after that, I'm besides myself. I'm so excited. I can't believe I'm here.
I want to warn you today, I have coffee over here. I have a huge amount of energy. I thought we'd have some fun and get right into cross-examination. How do you like that?
I love it. And little did I know that I was not only going to get Tina, but I was going to get all of Tina's pent-up energy from 11 days in hibernation. So I am ready to roll, Tina.
Okay, awesome. I've been wanting to talk to you for a super long time. We have some things that we're going to clear up about. One of the things that I want to really deeply understand is here, everybody knows your name, Brian, because you are affiliated chief counsel with Hamburger Law Firm. And then you're president and CEO of Market Counsel. It's affiliated consultancy. You started both operations in August of 2000. Congratulations. What was the purpose of starting those both businesses together and those both entities, bam, 22 years ago, like talking about doing the hard things?
Well, why not, right? So you don't really you don't really go slow into these questions, do you, Tina? So, I really wanted to create a brand that could articulate the work that we did for this profession. And I didn't want the brand to be me, right? That's why I wanted Market Counsel. I didn't want the brand to be me. Admittedly, over the years, I've come to understand that I totally underestimated this human need that every team needs a mascot, right? That Tesla needs Elon Musk, right? Or that Apple needed Steve Jobs or Tim Cook. I mean, and I don't equate myself anywhere near these icons, but it seems that people want every team to have a mascot. And so, but when I started out, I really wanted Market Counsel to be itself and not necessarily be tied to me. I started the law firm with far more humble expectations. It was just to facilitate the legal work. I didn't want to walk away from the practice of law. But they're two distinct entities, right? And we run them as distinct entities along with the other businesses that we operate. And they're tied together by a common management company. But all of Market Counsel's work emanates from a project plan or a content curriculum. Market Counsel always assumes that the advisor doesn't even know the questions that they should be asking. We're working with advisors at all stages of their life cycle, and we're working with them to develop elegant solutions to address their biggest challenges. And so when they come to us early on, they don't even know the questions they should be asking, right? When they're coming to us later for regulatory compliance advice, the questions they're asking aren't necessarily getting to the heart of the issues that they should be asking. And then even later on, when we're working with them on things like succession or the eventual exit of the business, I think that it's imperative for us to remember that while these individuals are advisors in their career, they're not advisors when they come to us, right? They're clients when they come to us, and they are customers and they're students, and they need to learn, and they need our education. And so Market Counsel always starts with that very humble assumption. At Hamburger Law, on the other hand, we're really focused on two distinct things. We're focused on creating new things and solving big problems. Right? And so we take so many of the ideas that come from our regular interactions at Market Counsel, the day-to-day interactions we have with clients, and we can work with them to execute on those plans end to end, right? We don't have to say, oh, let's kick that over to legal counsel and hope that it ends up meeting with your objectives. We can help them with that all the way through the end. And as for solving problems, they fit really into two buckets, either leveraging our relationships, trust and goodwill to avoid either an embarrassment or major disaster, or using our strategy and litigation skills to win fights against pretty outsized opponents. So the businesses definitely do work hand in hand with one another, but they are two distinct businesses that I think complement one another's efforts.
Well, I was lucky enough to meet the team over recently at the Market Counsel Summit, and I can understand where you're coming from to make this so broad. And I love the way that you talk about the fact that every company needs a mascot. And I think part of that is because there's that philosophy, there's that culture, there's the fabric of how just a business goes out and serves advisors. What made you go into financial advisory to begin with? I mean, you have a JD from the University of Miami School of Law, recipient of Dean's Service Scholarship, President's Pinnacle Award, editor-in-chief for, and I prepared for this, Brian, I YouTubed this, Res Ipsa Loquitur. I hope I pronounced that okay.
Very
BS,
good.
Thank you. A BS in finance from economics from Quinnipiac. There's a couple of things there. How do you get to serve advisors 22 years ago? Where does that decision come about? Clearly, with a vitae like that, you could have picked a lot of different industries. You could have picked pharma. You could put a healthcare.
Well, I guess all of the decisions aren't necessarily always clear in front of you. I mean, I could become an airline pilot, which is what I wanted to do when I was a little kid, because apparently you need good eyesight for that. But I don't know if the choice of industry or choice of career is necessarily the critical intersection. I think your lot in life is largely determined by where you start, combined with every single choice that you make or don't make at every decision point. I think it's kind of complex. I think it's so complex that we as humans don't necessarily get our wrap our arms around it. I became familiar with the profession of investment advice by way of my father. My father made his way from being a manager at a textile factory to owning an ice cream shop to selling life insurance, and then making that path, that inroad into this space. So from life insurance over to financial planning, from financial planning over to independent insurance affiliated broker dealer, and from that broker dealer over to investment advice. Right. So one of the more common paths into this space. And I got to know his friends and his colleagues, and I got to really understand the struggle, right? What do they say, right? The struggle's real. It was a real struggle, right? But the struggle was so nuanced that him and his colleagues faced because they just simply didn't understand what they didn't understand. They didn't understand the restrictions. What they did is they understood yes and no from the compliance department, but they didn't understand necessarily why. They didn't necessarily always understand all of their options when it came to business. And so, it was an area for me that was ripe for direction, right? That it was sufficiently complex that people genuinely needed advice. And it wasn't an area that was necessarily going to be disrupted anytime soon by technology, or automation, because I think there remains a significant human judgment component that's required here.
I've been in the industry now since 2006. A lot of the reason that I asked the question to understand where everybody's origin story starts back and links back to how they became into this industry. Because had I met you when I was in college, I would have been here in my 20s. I'm serious, right? Because you hear the stigma of financial services, and yet this stuff, as challenging it is, and I've watched you in action. There's such a part of it that's so exciting and passionate. The people in this industry right now, especially when you get to mid and senior level, like we're here because there's that inner desire. There's something sparking us to actually be here and wanting to be part of the solution set for advisors.
Well, I think when you get close to it, Tina, you start to understand that financial services is not some esoteric exercise in financial products, right? And securities. That financial service is really about people, right? And it's about helping people at the times in their life where they need it most. And I knew that I didn't have the patience or the temperament to be sitting down as financial advisors, had done at the time at the dining room table. Now it's kind of the proverbial dining room table, and working with clients on their asset allocation and working with them on their financial plans. But I wanted to help enable that, right? And if the thought then was that if I can help create more successful and effective financial advisors, then I'm actually leveraging my skills and capabilities beyond helping any one individual client. But I mean, at the time that I decided to pursue this space, I didn't even know what the practice of law really is, right? I mean, I had one lawyer in the family, but wasn't all that close to him. So I didn't know what a career in the law really looked like. I don't know if I'd really characterize myself as having a career in the law right now, but it was so foreign to me, right? And if it weren't for my grandmother pushing me in that direction, I probably would have found like a more traditional path. But I mean, picture me as a kid getting out of undergrad, visiting her in Florida, and she's the one who introduces the conversation. Admittedly, my job prospects weren't all that tantalizing at the time. I think I got offers from a few mutual fund companies who offered to bring me into their call center. And she threw a whole bunch of annual reports down at the table. And she said, I want you to read these and come back to me and tell me what your sense is after reading them, particularly about their board of directors, I remember her saying. And I said, yeah, sure. And so I, flipping through all of these different annual reports. So I came back to her kind of in a smart ass way. And I said, okay, the board of directors are a bunch of old, white, bald guys. And, I'm sure she hit me upside the head. And she says, well, I want you to look a little deeper, because what I want you to get out of that is that many of them are lawyers, right? You don't have to only take out of law school a legal education and treat it as a career. What they took out of law school is that they know the rules. And she said, you're going to need to know the rules if you expect to win the game. And she would continue to always tell me, you got to know the rules. And all of this creativity is going to get you in a lot of trouble if you don't know the rules. And so with that, I took the LSAT on kind of a Women of Prayer, along with a job selling women's shoes at the time. And before you know it, I'm at the University of Miami studying law.
See, I knew that you have the DNA of women's empowerment when I was doing this research on you. And then I read the story of your grandmother. So I want to also talk about, there's another interesting side to her, because it wasn't only the investment portfolio side, but what else did she do?
So my grandmother came to run and own an auto body shop in North Bergen, New Jersey, and in Fort Lee, New Jersey. And she ran it for many years following my grandfather's early passing.
See, when I read that, and I was like, wow, that's a story of empowerment here. And it's kind of one of the reasons, well, it's not kind of, it is the reason why I invited you here. It is the reason why you are the first podcast, because you helped me to discover an aha moment. And we were at the Wealthies. And then you said to me, you said, hey, I've got a bone to pick with you. What is this women's only podcast? And I said, well, Brian, I feel that women, especially mid and senior level career women, I would like to help amplify their voices. I want to shine light on people in the industry who maybe have never had the light before, but who have been here for 20, 30, and 40 years. And you agreed with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then what you helped me discover, Brian, is I said, you know what? Kind of goes back to what you said at the beginning of the broadcast about doing better. And I said, maybe that actually that's too small-sided, too one-sided. And that by having you here, relaying the story about your grandmother owning the auto body shop, talking and challenging you with investment portfolios, it's what changed your life.
Well, I'm glad that our conversation had an impact. I have a huge amount of respect for the work that you're doing, Tina, but I did have a bone to pick with you, because I completely reject the notion that you need to be a woman to champion equity and fairness. I mean, there's no controversy here, right? The only controversial aspect is perhaps who's against this.
Yeah.
And I think that it's natural for you to start out and think that there needs to be a fight. There needs to be like a battle or a war to kind of garner attention and rally the troops. But I'm not quite sure why we can't just unify on the expectations and then work together to craft a plan. I mean, it's modern for sure. Like there's such this polarizing view, like us versus them, but it makes for a far more difficult fight. I mean, literally, Tina, by including men in that same cause, you're increasing your troops by 100%. Right. So like, why exclude them? And I think that there may be some on the fringe that aren't aligned in your goal of highlighting these success stories, but I think they'd be few and far between. I mean, I enjoy plenty of conversations with men in this industry where women aren't present. And I can tell you that it's been a long time since I've heard anyone make a comment that's to the exclusion of women. I'm sure it still exists. But a lot of the locker room banter, which was just accepted for so long, has really been suppressed in a pretty big way. But I mean, I get it, right? I mean, I see what happens on social media, but I think that amidst all this focus on individuality and kind of what tribe we each belong to and where we all come from, I think we've really allowed our differences to overshadow our commonalities. And I think that's sad, right? Women, men, I mean, we're not to be really corny about it, but I mean, we're people, right? And in the end, not only are we people, but we're driven by a lot of these common desires to help and to create value. And I think there's a lot more that we have in common than what separates us.
And I want to be very clear also too, and very transparent. It was never at the expense or an intentional effort of not including men. It was that so many women that I spoke to never had the light, never had the limelight, and that there's a finite amount of episodes that I could do in a given year. And when it came time to saying, hey, wait, I want to help that woman. I grew up in a single parent household. My mother was the champion of our family and helped to send me to Tenafly High School, Fairleigh Dickinson University, NYU, all of that, and had a bookkeeping business, right? So she helped to champion my future in the same way that your grandmother did.
And you need that.
You do,
right?
you do.
Everyone needs that champion, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at some point in everyone's life who's made anything of their lives, they've had a champion. They've had someone that believes in them. And so I am 100% behind the cause of, hey, let's tell those untold stories, right? Let's tell those stories of inspiration, those stories that make people understand where that success really emanates from. I just don't think it's a women versus men thing. And you may, because of that scope, you may end up having more women on your broadcast than men. I get that. And I won't have a bone to pick with you about that. I just don't think it's one to the exclusion of the other.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, exactly. And I wanted to also, too, I wanted to make sure that you had a voice here in the suite, because who better to champion that message? Hey, listeners, do you want actionable advice and inspiration for your day? Do you want to take your leadership to the next level? If you do, then follow us on Instagram at In the Suite Pod and get it all on social. This week, we featured strategies on how to declutter your calendar and how to increase your pay. All tips we can use from our amazing guests. So please give us a follow. I would appreciate it so much. And when you do, be sure to send us a DM so we can send you a special surprise as a token of our gratitude. I enjoyed very much being at Market Counsel. We had 9 interviews, and we were gracious enough that Cheryl Penny gave of his time, Rob Baldwin gave of his time, Joel Bruckenstein, Craig Iskowitz. I mean, it goes on, George Tamer, and everyone was willing to come into the suite just on the spot. We were scrappy about it too. I didn't necessarily have a game plan. I just set up my computer. And so this whole idea of this summit was just an awakening of sorts. And for me, the time was perfect, because what better way to launch season 3 than with this philosophy?
That's wonderful. And I'm glad you got so much out of the summit. The summit has really just turned into something that I wish I could say we intended from the beginning, but it's such a great place for you to have that podcast, because really you look up and it's the who's who of the industry, right? We're so humbled to be able to host all of these names that so many people read about and are talked about throughout the year. And then at the summit, you look up and they're there, right? They're just standing there, in the hallway in an incredibly democratized manner, just having conversations with one another. It's a forum unlike any other. And I'm really glad you had an opportunity to experience that this year.
I even spoke to Rick Edelman, who, if he weren't busy around doing all the things that he was doing on stage with all of the other in podcasting row, I certainly would have grabbed him and kidnapped him to come in the suite. But literally, I saw him sitting there and I said, I really want to thank you for being so future oriented to take this industry into the future. Thank you for being a thought leader. That was it. I just wanted to, and I've seen him obviously numerous times at T3 and whatnot. But one of the things at Market Counsel is that anybody at any time will welcome the conversation. That's the key. And even someone like a Rick Edelman just welcomed a dialogue that we had for a few minutes there.
Well, I'll let him be the judge of that, Tina. But no, seriously, I think that you're right. And that's what we've really worked really hard to design, is that I had an advisor that I ran into on Monday night. So keep in mind, we only opened the conference on Monday. And on Monday night, I ran into the advisor on my way back to my room. And I said, hey, are you settling in okay? He goes, settling in. He said, if the conference ended right now, everything would have been well worth it. He said, I can't believe how many conversations I had just this evening with people that I've just admired throughout the space. And it really is humbling and such an honor. I don't just say that, to be able to play host to all of these incredible people, to this community that we built over the years. And, I could explain it to you when we were on the phone or when we'd see each other at other places, but I was like, I know you've got vacation planned, but I really want you to experience this one of these years. And I really think that it'd be right up your alley, because it's not just the people that are there. It's just end of the year, everyone takes the tie off. They're in a real relaxed state, and they're so receptive and open to conversation. And it's amazing.
Well, I was telling Ryan Marcus before, is I said, you know what? now I can never not be like, you've found a way to be part of my December family. We normally, the reason that I haven't been to Market Counsel is because we've had family gatherings. Right before the pandemic in 2020, we were in Palermo, Sicily. My family is Italian, in case you didn't know. So that's what's kind of prevented me. So this was luckily 13. But that in itself, I was like, wait, wow, 13 years. I want to just go back. What made you think of this 13 years ago?
You know, the genesis was far more modest. I mean, we hosted a compliance workshop in your hometown of Tenafly, New Jersey. It was really small. I think I like to say there were 35 people here, but I might have been counting some of the hotel staff that were serving food.
It was
at the
Clinton, and
exactly.
I saw that, and I'm like, wait, that's where we did like Tenafly High School. That's where we
exactly. It was such a modest endeavor. We were afraid that we were going to forget like the dry erase markers, right? It was really, there was something there, right? I mean, we set it up as a compliance workshop, but there was really something there. And so the next year we hosted our conference, and we did it down in Princeton, New Jersey, at the former Merrill Lynch training facility down there, and we more than doubled our numbers. And the year after that, we more than doubled those numbers. And what we found along the way was this community, and it was a community of business leaders who just weren't satisfied with the status quo. They were looking for this forum that just didn't exist, right? There was membership organizations hosted their events, but that was comprised of people that were already part of that membership organization. And we had custodians and other broker dealers who were hosting their conferences. But again, it was comprised of their users or their customers. Even now we have fintech firms that have their own conferences, but they're user conferences.
Right.
But what didn't exist was this neutral forum, one where they can gather and share and discuss and get ready for this, actually debate these big topics. And from my perspective, the secret here is that I had this once a year opportunity to actually demonstrate for my team what a small but mighty group of people can actually pull off. Right. This is so outside of our wheelhouse, right? We run a law firm, run a consulting firm. We have no business running an industry event. And when I show our small group what an outsized impact that we can have, it has such lasting effects culturally. This is not a standalone business endeavor for us. It's really the encapsulation of our research, of our content, and of all of our relationships. It's the epitome of who we are.
I loved it that your kids are even involved in that too. Your daughter, Ella, was outstanding. How long have the kids been involved in that? How did you manage that feat? Let's talk about that.
Well, like you, this was their first summit that they were there. So Ella and Sid were both there. It's my youngest and my oldest. Jake was away at finals week at Georgetown. But each year they see me do this deep dive and become effectively unavailable for weeks on end leading into the summit. And then, of course, for the summit. But I really wanted them to finally see why. And I don't think I did a good job of explaining it, because they didn't really understand, like, what do you mean you're completely unavailable? You mean from morning till night, you only have time to check in and nothing else? And they've lived this, right? They've lived this side by side. I mean, Ella was 6 months old when I left the law firm to start these companies. And she's crawling around the office when her mom and I were assembling desks that we bought from Office Max. I mean, they've had countless dinners with me at the office throughout their childhood. In fact, for a while, about 18 to 20 years ago, we actually bought a house that had an office wing to it, right? So there was a separate entrance for the office. And so my kids were able to come over after school. We had 16 employees working effectively out of our house. And my kids would be able to come over after school to what used to be a doctor's office. And I'm realizing, by the way, as you were talking about this, that I think that's something that's unique to like Northern Jersey and Long Island, right? Is this concept where you have like a doctor's office attached to the doctor's home.
Yeah.
And so they're no strangers to the business. I mean, with Ella being 6 months old when I started the business, she's kind of the human visualization of the businesses. Like I see how mature they are by looking at her.
Well, this is a podcast about women's empowerment, and I thought like that was just so cool. I love to see families get involved, kids get involved in their parents' profession. My daughter here spent almost a year at C-Suite Social Media after 9 years of teaching, and we purposely positioned her for work at a VR education startup. And so that's going great. I love to see that. I'm seeing that more and more in the industry where you're meeting the second generation. What do you think was their main takeaway? What would they say about you and about the conference if you weren't in the room?
I'd like to think that they would say the same thing if I were in the room or if I weren't in the room. My three kids are my harshest critics and my biggest fans. And we've had a brutally honest relationship with each other over the years, like family should. So I don't think that it would be any different. But I think the takeaway that resonated most with them is the unbelievable gratitude that they heard from attendees, right? And you're going to get me kind of choked up when we talk about this, but I live on that gratitude. I mean, when people send me words that are nice things about anyone I care about, whether it's anyone on my team or whether it's my kids, that's how to get to me, right? Is to say something nice about them. And here at work, we post those things. We call them buzz. We post them on our intranet. And anytime that I get it or anytime anyone gets it, they post it up there so that we can all share it. But that was one of the coolest things, is to hear the kids talk about clients or industry partners. And they said, when they found out that I was your son or that I was your daughter, they told me this story, or they explained how you helped them. Because I don't talk about that in front of the kids, right? So much of what we do really is confidential, right? And really has to be discreet. And I know that it seems silly when people say, well, you can tell your kids. You can't tell your kids because you don't know who your kids know that work somewhere else, or that end up getting so much of what I do is really discreet, that when they hear it from the clients or from our industry partners about work we've done together, it really moved them, I think, and had an impact on them.
Here you've got this juxtaposition of your line of work that, again, confidentiality, not talking about anything, but yet on social media is how you use social media to acknowledge your team. And specifically when things haven't gone as well. I would be remiss if I didn't send and extend my condolences to you. In April of right when the pandemic started, you happened to lose Peter Eason, a member of your team, at age 53, and that you were very vocal on social media. And that, again, that was in the beginning of the pandemic, when people weren't sure what was going on and all of these fatalities. And I like the way that you continue to show up and model that leadership throughout the industry. I think it's positive for your children. I think it's positive for the next gen, especially, and for the people that are already here to know that it's okay to show emotion. It's okay to show gratitude. It's okay to show humility and humanity, and to use the channels of social media, of conferences, of speaking, of podcasting in order to get those messages out.
Yeah, it's an incredibly uncomfortable topic. I mean, Peter was just an outsized human being in every way. I mean, big guy with an even bigger heart and bigger personality. And you couldn't meet him for more than half a minute and not realize that he was just an extraordinary person. I never want to be perceived as drafting on loss of life or illness. And so I was very hesitant to share that over social media because it's very real. My fear, however, was that people didn't understand how real it was at the time. And I think most people get it now, of course. There's still some holdouts somehow, but I think most people get it. They understand the profound impact that this pandemic has. And I think business leaders are a lot more sensitive that when they talk about loss of buying power when it comes to inflation, or they talk about the inconveniences caused by the pandemic. I think many are sensitive enough to realize that these really are first world problems in every way, right? That the real problems are the loss of life and the pain and suffering that so many have endured. I mean, I think leaders, you got to go back. Remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Remember we learned that back in, was it Management 101?
Yep.
Right? And leaders can't forget that their very first obligation to those they care about is to provide them with safety and security, right? That was number one, right? That was before like shelter is,
right.
This notion of, food, this notion of safety and security. And so I shudder when I see on social media leaders talking about their response to this pandemic as, we're going to power through this. We're going to get to the next level. And you can't help but wonder, like, is that your 10-year lease talking? Is that your commitment to the expense? Because you can't let that dictate the decisions we make. We got to live with these decisions long after that expense wears off. So early in the pandemic, I mean, we assured our team, I didn't know how we were going to do it, but we assured our team that we're going to make it work, and that no one's going to be put in a position where they're ever going to have to compromise their safety and security to do their job. And last week we acted upon that, and we finally shuttered our office, and we reallocated all of the expenses of our physical office space to technology and more regular meetings and other interactions. So I think it's really important. I think it's also important that things like that, you talk about us losing Peter and Peter passing away. I think as a leader, you have to give your team history. You have to give them context, right? Otherwise, their work doesn't have meaning. We've had a 20-year tradition that whenever someone returned from a conference, their name badge went up on the wall in our cafe. And over time, we assembled hundreds and hundreds of these name badges. They were hanging. It looked like a frat house.
Wow.
The cafe. And what I didn't realize early on, it just became kind of something to do, right? We just would hang it on one of the hooks in there. And before you knew it, you'd stand in this cafe and you'd be surrounded. Every wall you would look at would just have these name tags. And it didn't hit me until someone had asked me about it. And I said, every one of those name tags represent a night away from their family that someone on your team contributed in order for our brand to be where it is, right? And honestly, Tina, it didn't even hit me until the words came out of my mouth, right? It wasn't like I had thought through that or was strategic about keeping the name badges, but it gave them meaning. I mean, what's more powerful than when someone goes and swings by for a cup of coffee, that they're reminded that their efforts are the latest iteration of that, right? They're running the next leg of the relay, that we're all standing on the shoulders of those that came before us.
That's huge right there. Is there anything else from the leadership perspective, whether or not that it's an industry trend, it's a factor, it's something on that needs to be on the mind of every single advisor?
We can go so many directions with that question, Tina. I mean, we are constantly working with advisors on making sure that whatever is most important for them are the issues that we are focused on. So we don't go about this by saying, here's the special of the month, right? Or here's our topic of the week. We go about this by really taking a deep dive with our clients early on, getting to know them, getting to know their priorities, getting to know obviously what's important to them, what's urgent, what's top of mind, what their fears are, where their risks reside, what their appetite for risk may be, and maybe a bit about their history so we know where they've been. And then we start working with them towards, well, how do we create something that's meaningful for them? How do we create kind of a curriculum that allows us to serve them best? And it's not the same for everybody.
Right.
It's going to be different for every single firm that we work with. And the cool thing about the summit, so the summit is where we kind of pull all this together.
Right.
The cool thing is we never have to decide in advance. So what success has brought us with the summit is that I can develop the curriculum really, really late. And most people are fine with that. Some people care. The journalists care. They always want to know in advance, what are we covering, who's speaking and all that. But it's strange. Our attendees show up and they don't look at the curriculum. They know that by going there, we're going to put together a strong curriculum. It's going to be highly relevant. We're going to do it devoid of sponsor influence. So they know that we have nothing but the best of intentions in pulling it together. And they're really coming to connect with one another, right? So we have that benefit of figuring out as we go and synthesizing information as the year goes on and getting nominations from other folks who have been at the summit before, say, you should speak to so-and-so, or you should think about covering this topic. And that's really powerful because it allows us to really crowdsource the very best agenda we can put together.
Yeah. One of the things that came to my mind is, now somebody been in the business like you for 22 years, how much of your business is proactive versus reactive on the advisory side, right? And then how have those percentages changed in the last few years? Like, are advisors becoming more proactive as a result of just how compliance and regulatory has just increased? I think we see a lot of industry consolidation around it in the space because advisors like, wow, there's just so much more that I have to deal with this year than I did last year. Any comments on that?
It's an outstanding question, because what you're getting to is you're getting to the heart of how we constructed our set of services, because they're a hedge against one another, right? You talk about like, oh, we're in good times or bad, we're recession proof. We're not recession proof, right? We're not insulated from the marketplace. What we do though is we're able to operate our complete service set and reallocate resources as necessary. And so there has been a really clear trend that has developed over the last several years where firms are looking to rid themselves of complexity, right? So yeah, some of the smaller, less sophisticated firms in the space are opting to join other firms. They're looking to become acquired. They don't want the hassles of business operations. We're also seeing a move within the regulatory compliance space for people to look for automated solutions, low-cost automated solutions that end up costing them more to fix in the end. Right. So our resources have actually shifted over the last 3 years, and we've earned far more than we've ever earned before on fixing problems, whether they're bona fide enforcement defense, where we're defending a company, or it's defending a lawsuit, or simply working with them politically to address some of the issues that they have. We are spending an outsized amount of time on that in an area where I call unforced errors. Right. They're problems that were clearly avoidable if we had done what firms were doing 4 or 5 years ago. But they're looking to cut short-term expenses, and it's unfortunately come to the literal expense of long-term costs.
Here in the suite, we are a solutions provider as well, too. And I know that there are people that are going to want to contact you. Again, doing better and being better might mean for some firms to actually say, hey, maybe I've got to get in touch with what maybe they've got to do different in the future. What's the best way for those people to get in touch with you and even to talk to you about all of the great things that we were talking about, leadership, women's empowerment opportunities at Market Counsel?
Absolutely. Listen, as I told you, I mean, nominations are a huge source of where we cull content from. I don't know how to answer your question because we're really proud of the work we do for our clients. But at the same time, I insist that we're humble about that work as well, right? We're not out there making announcements about firms that we've launched or that we saved this firm from this type of regulatory action. We're really sensitive about sharing work, right? Like these firms entrust to us a lot of their work product. And so we're sensitive about taking our collaborative work and sharing it with others. So point I made with my kids is accurate here. Almost 100% of the work that I do is on confidential and discrete matters. So I think LinkedIn has been a great way to keep up with the network, but it's really not going to give anyone insight as to the work that we do. And I think you mentioned Ryan earlier. Ryan heads up our engagement team, and Ryan is probably the best person to really assess someone's needs, make sure that we're clear on conflicts of interest, and really arrange to see if there's some value that we could create in doing work for an advisor.
Well, we'll put Ryan's information and some links back to the firm. But a great question, I want to say it's a really great question this year that we've never asked before. What is your favorite, or introduce us to a charity, a nonprofit, a GoFundMe, or a cause that you believe in, and share why you believe in it?
Oh man, you're really
I know, right?
So you're saving the best for last. All right, can I give you two? Can I give you two?
Yes. Please do.
All right. So the first one is if you really want to contribute to the cause and get dirty. I'm a gray shirt. I know it's a really lofty title for Team Rubicon, and having the opportunity to put on your boots and roll up your sleeves and put on a gray shirt that you literally write your name on. That's how they keep track of who you are. Get absolutely filthy, and really all for an opportunity to help people on one of the worst days of their life is an incredibly grounding experience. And I'd encourage anyone who wants to get dirty and connect with veterans and the good work that Team Rubicon does. Sure, you can write a check. I'm sure they'd be happy to have it, but they've got so many corporate sponsors. I don't think it's your money they need. I think they need really good people at all different levels. And I think it's such a fulfilling opportunity and an experience because it takes you out of the fluorescent lights and gets you working alongside and for great people. And I would be remiss to not tell you where to send your money, since you're asking, like, how do you help the cause? And you could send your money to invest in others. I was very fortunate to have been asked to sit on their board of directors a few years ago. And I'm just such a big believer in the cause. It's a charity that showcases the positive impact that financial advisors have on their communities and the world. And with so much negative news over the years about bad advisors. And we know that those are the minority, right? They make up almost none of the advisors that we interact with. It's so great to have this charity that showcases the great work that advisors are doing themselves. And this past year, we passed the milestone. We donated $1 million to charities that financial advisors care about. And that to me is real leverage, right? That the advisor's working on it and they submit their charity, and we have an opportunity to donate to these charities that advisors are supporting and doing great work in. So Invest in Others is another wonderful organization.
Wonderful. We're going to put a link in the show notes. It's funny. I did a NAPFA virtual event and I asked for an honorarium for Invest in Others. And so been a big fan of what you're doing. You find a way to give back. And that was also too a clear message that we wanted to bring in the suite for 2022 season 3 is that we noticed that great people and great leaders have this charitable, philanthropic, this giving quality to them. So by having this question, we are so excited to discover for people who are listening, especially for them to get involved. So I not only want to thank you for planting those seeds, but just for being a guest here in the suite. We're so privileged today. Thank you for making yourself available for this conversation. I know it's going to do such good in the world. And thank you for supporting me too.
The honor is all mine. Really, it is. I love when I have the ability to have a relationship with someone where I can call them out and they respond, really? Why don't you come in and talk about it, right? That to me is what the world needs more of.
Thank you, Brian. You're listening to In the Suite, a podcast that shares amazing stories of women in business in the financial services and the wealth management industry. Our producers are Tina Powell and Kevin Hirshhorn. Our editor-at-large is Kevin Hirshhorn. Our content writers are Dimple Rashandani, Daniel Wheeler, Olivia Gonzalez, and Tina Powell. In the Suite podcast is sponsored by C-Suite Social Media, a high-growth digital marketing and social media agency for the financial services and the wealth management industry. You can visit csuitesocialmedia.com to learn more. And thank you so much for listening and subscribing. We've got listeners in 1,071 cities and 55 countries at the time of this recording. That number absolutely blows my mind, and we owe it all to you. So thank you. Please let us know how you enjoyed this episode with the amazing Brian Hamburger, and share your thoughts on social media, #InTheSuite. You can connect with Brian on LinkedIn and Twitter at HDeluxe, and visit his website, www.marketcounsel.com. And always, if you would like to make a suggestion for a show, an episode, please send it to me at tina@inthesuitepodcast.com. Again, thank you so much for listening and subscribing to In the Suite.